Thanks so much for tuning in. Today, we are going to be building a really cool UI component with SwiftUI. So just a quick backstory. I was browsing on Instagram, which isn't too common for me anymore, but I was just paying attention to the neat UI stuff around the app, like certain transitions and things like that. There's a lot of cool stuff to notice in there. And one thing that caught my eye that instantly made me want to see if I could build it was their search bar. And if you go into here, I actually have this pulled up here. So if you go into the search bar here, you'll see that nothing looks too crazy, right? But if you click play here and you focus the search bar, you'll notice something starts to happen. So they have these kind of search suggestions, and you'll see they animate in like this kind of vertical carousel type of way. And I just thought that was so cool, and it's functional, it's awesome looking, and it's just super helpful for the user, right? So I went ahead and tried to build that, and I'll show you what that looks like here. So I have this search bar, and when you tap on it, search, this little guy animates up, and you'll see we have this kind of like rotating through hints or suggestions or, query ideas. And this is what we're going to be building. I think this is super cool. I'm a little biased, but I think mine's a tad bit better since the word search stays put and only the hints are, hints or suggestions are cycling through, which I think is a little bit nicer. I think the feels a little bit more polished. But if we were to enter some text, we also have this nice animation where the clear button pops up. We just hit enter right now to disable it. You'll see that goes away. This kind of animates back down once we focus it again. That comes back in, and it works when you enter or when you delete the last note. The clear button will go away again, and it's also functional. So if we tap that, that goes away too. So this is what we're going to be building. I'm super stoked to have you guys with me and to build this out. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing we need is a project, right? So let's go ahead and set that up. I'm going to go to File here. By the way, I am working out of Xcode, Xcode 15 Beta 2. Which shouldn't really be a problem. Even if you're on Xcode 14, I'm not really using any of the new stuff. So there's only a couple things, but they are things that you can definitely get away with using Xcode 14. And I'll make sure I touch on that as we go. So I'm going to go to new project here, and iOS is good. App, that's good. We'll hit next. I'm going to call this animated Textfield. And we will save it here. And you can check this if you want to. I always recommend doing that. And that way you can keep track of all your changes. And bam, looks like we have that set up. And it's looking pretty good. I'll leave that. This is nice and big. Hopefully you can read that okay. And I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. And before we get going, I'm actually going to do a little bit of setup here just to make sure we're nice and organized. I'm going to create 4 groups here and like 4 folders. So I'm going to go new group. First one's going to be extensions. And the next one is going to be mock. I'll do this. And the next one is going to be screens. And the last one is going to be views. And what I like to do here is just right click on this and do sort by type. That way it kind of like puts all the folders together, and it'll alphabetize it too. You don't have to do that. I like to do that. And then the next thing we'll need is we're actually going to need some data that we can work with. This way it'll speed up the process a little bit, because you don't want to be, just hard coding in everything. I mean, you definitely can, but we're going to go this route. So on mock, I'm going to go create a new file here, and Swift file is fine. And I'm going to call this mock hint data. Enter that in, and I'm going to paste in some code, and then I'm going to explain what's going on. So let me paste this in. Alrighty, so we have this enum up here called mock hints, and it just has some arrays in here, just some static arrays that we can access just by mock hints dot shopping or dot locations or numbers. And this is just to give us some hint data to work with, which, by the way, I'm running with the word hint rather than suggestions, just so long of a name to type and to say. So hint is just nice. And I feel like it still kind of conveys the purpose, because the search bar is kind of displaying these hints like, hey, here's some hints of things that you can search, right? So that's kind of what I went with. This first one went with shopping. This one's the one, these hints here most closely match like what Instagram shows. I kind of went with this like e-commerce kind of theme here. And then the next one is locations. So it kind of is showing like maybe if you were doing like a search or a location lookup. And the last one, this numbers one, it's just going through 0 through 4 and it's turning it into a string. And this is just for sanity check. So when, which this will make sense later. And when we're trying to figure out the whole carousel thing to make sure it's looping properly, we'll use this here. So, and then this, we have this struct called mock. And this is basically just setting up our context for the different ones like shopping, location, and numbers. And that's really all it's doing. We have this title, and then we have this active and inactive placeholder, which that'll make more sense later too. And then your hints. And obviously we need this to work with because, and then all it's doing is these are just reaching out to these guys here. So that's it. But if ever in this video you need to pause it to like make sure you see anything, feel free to do so. And hopefully I'll try to cover things as thoroughly as possible without being too long about everything. So that's it. So let's move on. So a good place for us to start, I think, would be to start building out the animated portion, right? The placeholder that animates like the vertical carousel. So let's go ahead and do that. So on the views folder here, I'm going to do new file right here. And we want a SwiftUI view. So I'm going to hit next. And I'm going to call this hints carousel view, just like that. And I think a good place for us to start here is to get some properties going and the initializer. And I'm going to paste in some code here and then I'll explain what the code is. There we are. And our preview should complain, which it is, so it's fine. So here we're just passing in an optional placeholder, which is just an optional string. We have hints next, which is just an array of strings, and this is what we're going to be looping through. Then we have this current index, which is a state property, and this is what's going to be responsible for us tracking where we are in looping through the different hints. And it's also going to be partly responsible for getting the view to redraw every time it needs an update. Next, we have this property called hints count, and this is because we do need to access the counts property on hints, and instead of doing the calculation every single time we need to access that property, because it does have to loop through every single element in order to give us the total of elements that are inside of that array every time we want to access that. So it's better we just do it once here on line 31 and we just store it. That way we don't have to calculate it every time. It's a little more efficient this way. So next I have this enum called start index, because a little earlier I said it would be pretty neat if we can allow, you know, whoever's using this, including our future selves, right, the ability to choose kind of where this starts from. Like, does it either start at the first? I mean, we just did this more of like in a simple way where we just give the option to choose a random start index or just use the first index. You can, however, choose to allow an integer to be passed in, so you can change this to int. The only thing is, if you do that, definitely make sure you check to make sure that start index is within the bounds of how many elements are actually inside the array. And you could always create a fallback to saying like, hey, if this is too large, then we're just going to start at the first index, or we're going to choose a random one that is within the range of how many elements are inside that array. So so that's kind of what we're doing there. And we're just setting all the properties, and then we just switch over the start index, and we're giving current index. We're setting a new state with an initial value here for random, with a random number within the range of 0 to basically hints count -1. And for the first, we're just setting it to 0. So pretty basic stuff there. And also what I'm going to do is set up this preview here. So I'm going to go to the fix it. Basically, we're going to use this neat thing in Xcode 15 where I can say multi-line, and once I do this, it's going to actually put all of the parameters onto brand new lines, which is what I like because I think that looks a lot cleaner. So there we go. That looks awesome. And I'm going to change this to search. And for the hints, we're going to say mock hints, right? We're using our mock data here, and I'm going to do shopping. And then for this one, I'm just going to do first for right now, like that. And I'm actually going to wrap this in a VStack just in case. Boom. And there we go. I think it looks pretty good. And the next thing after this, we'll just want to start building out the body, right? So nothing's really happening right now because we didn't really touch the body here. In order to do that, what's going to happen is eventually we'll have some code in here, but then just to give you a little heads up, we'll need a timer, and that's going to trigger every so often, and that's how we're going to get our view to update. So let's go ahead. The body is actually really simple. So I'm going to paste this in, and we'll talk about it, of course. So plop that in there. And so basically we just have an H stack here, really simple as you can see, and it's just got a spacing of 10. I just thought that looked clean. And then we're checking that a placeholder exists. So this is that new unwrapping syntax, which is super nice. Like so stoked this is here. And then we just have a text where we pass the placeholder in. And then here we're accessing our hints array, and we're getting the hint at the current index. And then we have a spacer to push everything over to the left, as you could see as our preview has updated. Next, we're setting the foreground style to secondary, because if I change this to primary, you see how prominent it looks now? That's kind of weird for a placeholder. And so I think secondary looks good. And also foreground color is being deprecated. So foreground style is definitely the way to go. I mentioned that we need a timer. So let's go ahead and get that in here. I'm going to come right above our enum, place that in there. So here we can see it's a private property timer, and we're using the static function publish. And what it's basically doing, we're telling it, hey, we need you to fire every 2.5 seconds on the main thread, and the mode, it has like this mode that it runs in, and we're just saying common. Then we're using auto connect, and I believe this does some kind of like automatic setup and teardown for us. If we didn't use that, you wouldn't really see anything happening. So pretty nice syntax there. And I'm going to add this helper property, but first I'm going to add another mark statement here, and we're going to call this, I'm just going to say body like that, so I can, just helps me find things a little easier. And here I'm going to call this helper, so put another mark here, like so. And we need a function to update our current index, and this is what you're going to see right now. And I'll explain this here in a second. So I want to get one more function in here. Not a function really, but this is how we're going to receive every time the timer fires. So this is the onReceive, and basically every time this timer publishes a value every 2.5 seconds, this is set up to receive that value. We don't really care about the value, which is why we just got the underscore here. And then with animation, we're going to call this update current index. And this is what I meant about at the beginning, where the only things I'm using is this bouncy animation with iOS 17 and Xcode 15. If you're on Xcode 14 plus, you don't need that. You could just do something like that. Or instead of bouncy, you can just pass in spring is perfectly fine too. So, yeah, so let's talk about this. This is kind of the magic of it all right here. And it's cool because it's so simple, and it's just a one-liner code. So let me explain what's happening here. So we have the current index. So we have it starting at first, as you can see right here, and which means the index is 0, right? Because we did that above when we were setting up the properties in the initializer. And so essentially, let's say we have 3 elements inside of our array. So we have 0, 1, and 2. And so what's happening is once we start off at 0, and this is going to need to iterate over everything. The trick is we need to know when we're at the very end so that we can loop back around to the beginning again. And this is that whole carousel effect. And so essentially, I'm going to come down here and make a new line here. So what we're doing is we're saying, let's get the current index, which is 0, and we'll add 1 to it. So here you would see that we have 1. Then we want to modulo that by the total amount of the array, the total number of elements in the array, which in this little example here is 3. So then we do 1 modulo 3. And the interesting thing is anytime you have a number that's on the right that is bigger than on the left when you're using the modulo, it's always going to return the left side number. So this actually ends up being 1 because the thing is that the modulo, the way it works is that it's going to return the remainder after a division has taken place. So 3 can't go into 1, therefore you have everything left over from the left side. So, and I can show you that here. So if we do 3 divided by 1, 1 divided by 3, let's do it like that. But if we have 1 modulo 3, we see we get back 1. And let's say we increment this. So we have 2 modulo 3. Remember, if the right side is bigger than the left side, we're always going to get the left side back because 3 can't go into 2 at all. Therefore, all of this is left over, and that's why we get it back. Because remember, modulo gives us the remainder of what's left over after the division has taken place. So, and here's another interesting thing. If the numbers are the same, so this finally gets incremented to 3, we always get back 0 because 3 goes into 3. This number can go, if they're the same, this number always goes into this number an even amount of times, therefore nothing is left over. And so this is really cool. So you can see that if we start from the beginning, so we have 3 elements in here. So if we start off at 0, we see we get back 0, right? Because this can't go back in, so we always get back the left number. And then this, it gets incremented again, so we go back up to 1, we get 1 back, we get 2 back, and this is where we're at the 3rd element in the array. And then when it loops back over to 3, it says, hey, no, go back to 0, to the 1st element again. So I hope I made that clear, but this is exactly how we're going to achieve getting back to the 1st element after we've hit the last one. And let's see, as you can see here, everything's hooked up. So it's actually looping through everything, which is awesome. And remember I showed you that numbers array for our sanity check. We can actually use that right now. So if we turn shopping into numbers, we'll see it start off from 0, then it'll go to 1, 2, and then 3, and then I think there's only 4 in here, so 4, and then it should loop back around to 0 again. And there we go. And what's cool is this works wherever it starts. It doesn't matter. So if we turn this to random, you can see it started off at 4 and it's going to go to 0 and then start at 1, 2, 3, 4, 0 again. And then it'll just keep doing that as long as we keep this timer alive. So put it back to first. And all right, so I think that is pretty good. Now let's turn this back to shopping. Now this looks a little bit different. It doesn't really have the look that we're going for because, well, not only is it not animating the way we want, but also the different hints that are being cycled through aren't in quotes. And that really gives it that whole look about, hey, we're showing you this is the part to pay attention to. This is the query. We don't really care about search. We care about this word here being in quotes. So let's go up to the extensions folder and right click that. And I'm going to do new file. And we just want a Swift file here. So I'm going to go next. And I'm just going to call this string plus. And inside there, I'm going to paste some code. It's really short. There we go. So it's just an extension on string, and it's a function called quoted that just returns a string, right? Type of self, which is, we're in the context of a string right now. So we're just returning a string. And then we're taking the instance that we're working off of and passing it back in, but with quotes this time. And that's where you can see these two here. All these backslashes are escaping characters. If we didn't have that, these quotes wouldn't render inside the string. So we have to escape the characters we want to show in here that would normally signify something else. And in this case, quotes are for Swift to tell us that, hey, this is a string. So in order to get the quotes inside of a string to show up, we need to escape it using escape characters, which that's what a backslash does. So you can take that away, and it has to be for every character that you want to escape. So that's why we have one at this first quote, and we also are escaping this second quote too. So that's all that is there. And if we go back to the hint carousel view, right here where we're actually displaying the hint, right after this, we want to just say quoted. And now you can see that these are showing up in quotes now, which is pretty cool. So let's keep this thing going, and let's see if we can get this thing to actually animate the way we want it to and achieve the effect that we're after. I'm going to copy some more code. I'm going to put a property in here that is basically building our transition that we want. So that's this text transition, and I'm pretty sure now we don't even need this any transition here because it's already being told what it is right here. And this one we have it set as asymmetric because we want it to enter and leave differently. So when it comes in, we want it to come in from the bottom, and when it leaves, we want it to escape from, out the top way. So this way we have this neat effect where it's like once one is coming in, it's moving the other one out through the top, and I think that's going to get the look that we want. And also I always tend to combine this with opacity because it just makes it look a lot cleaner. Otherwise, like if you didn't do that, it kind of looks like everything's kind of mashing together. So so we have that set, and then all we need to do is call transition on our text view here. So we're going to say transition and then pass in our text transition right here. So let's see what that does. It's definitely not getting the look that we're looking for still. So what's happening here is that SwiftUI isn't really drawing a new one of these. Like, yeah, it's drawing a new one, but there's nothing to tell it that it was any different from the last one. So it's going to just essentially, it's like redrawing the same text view. And that is not what we're after. So we need some way to differentiate anytime the current index changes, and we need something else to basically flip a switch. So what we're going to use is an ID. So we can go here. So up here, I'm going to create a new property. We'll do it right next to this current index, and it's another state property called ID. And we essentially, when I thought of this, I was like, we only need two states, and what better thing to do that with than a Boolean, because it just has two states. It could either be true or false. So this ends up working here. And then all we need to do is come back down to our text view here and just do .id and pass in our ID there. Lastly, every time we update our current index, we want to change that, because you can see if I don't change this property every time the current index changes, nothing is going to change. You could see that we still have the same animation, the same effect. But now watch this. As soon as I do id.toggle every single time, now we get the effect that we're looking for. And I think that's pretty sweet. And you can see there's like hardly any code here. This is nothing. So we got the effect that we want by making sure that every time the current index is updated, that we're actually applying a different ID to it. So that way when it redraws, it says, hey, this is not the same text field, so we better animate the old one out and animate the new one in as it redraws. And then we learned how to get this kind of loop where we can iterate through each element, but then also loop back around to the beginning again, using this modulo operator and incrementing the current index, and then we modulo that by the total number of elements that are in there. And I think that's going to basically be the bulk of the project. Now we're going to build out the rest of the text field, and then kind of polish that up a little bit. But this is the whole thing, really. So this is pretty sweet. And yeah, let's keep moving on. We're going to build out the text field now. So the first thing we're going to do is we'll go to our views folder here, right click on that, new file, and we want a SwiftUI view, hit next, and I'm going to call this hints text, if I could type, text field. Just like that. And again, I'm going to paste in some code, and then we'll go over it. We're going to do our initializers and our properties, or our initializer and our properties. So I'll paste this in, and let's see what's happening here. Looks like I need an S here. Okay. Okay, so we have an optional image coming in here for the icon. One can be provided or it doesn't have to. And then we have a text, which is a binding. So we have a binding to the text for the text field. And because we're not going to own that, preferably another view is going to own that, and we're just going to be modifying it. Then we have our inactive and active placeholders, and we have our array of hints coming in, and then we have this start index, which you remember from the hints carousel view, and it's just using that one there. And then we have this on editing changed closure, which is going to pass back a boolean, and that we're going to get from the actual text field. And just to honor what you would get with a text field, if you use that directly, you're still going to be able to get access to that through this custom text field. Next, we have this showing carousel property. This is going to determine whether we should show our hints carousel, and we have this is editing property too, which we essentially just use this to animate certain things and just to polish things up a little bit. So nothing too crazy there. The only thing I'll mention here about the initializer is that for the start index, we have it defaulting to the first, and for the closure, we have it defaulting to nil. So that's pretty much it for that. And what I'm going to do too is just update this preview. So I'm going to bring in some more code here. I'm going to paste this in, and I'll talk about this. The reason why I'm doing this is because if I didn't have this extra view where we can hold some state like you see here, then we wouldn't really get our preview to update properly. We wouldn't really be able to test it well enough. So I'm just going to copy this and then paste this here. And we're not going to see anything yet because we haven't done anything to the body. But yeah, this whole struct here is what's going to allow us to test things out properly, because we can hold this, we can hold on to this state right here. So you may hear my cat in the background. Sorry about that. Before I add stuff to the body, I want to add this helper function here. And let me see, I'm going to do a mark statement here, and I'll just call this helpers. Actually, you know what? I think my code snippet has that already attached to it. So let's bring this in here. So yeah, it does. Sweet. So we need this placeholder here, because if we didn't have this property handling this for us, then I found an instance where you'd see two overlapping texts like clashing, and obviously it's not great. It's not what we're after. I can explain this a bit more going further if we need to, or at least point out where you would see that mishap takes place. So, but let's post the bulk of the code in here. So here we go. I'm gonna paste this code in here. And there we go. Those warnings should go away here in a second. And again, we need our S here. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to use that multi-line thing again here, because I think that just looks a lot better. And all right, a little easier to follow, I think. Okay, so here we're just checking if we do have an icon. If we do, then we want to go ahead and display it, and we're setting the foreground style to secondary, just like we did the placeholder, so that way it kind of matches. And both of these things here are really just for polish. So we're saying, and it's all based off that is editing, like I explained, it's just for polish here. And if we go down further, so basically if it is editing, show it at its full size. If not, then, or sorry, show it, at full opaqueness, I guess. And then if not, then lower the opacity down to 60%. With the scaling, same thing, show it at its full size. Otherwise, just show it at 90%. Just enough to give it a little zing, I guess, if you will. And then we have this Z stack here, and this is the what kind of allows the magic to take place. So we have our hints carousel, which is what we're after, but these are overlapping. So we were never going to modify the placeholder inside the text field, right? We don't have access to that, but we can kind of like trick people into thinking that this is what's happening. That kind of sounds evil, but that's essentially what's going on. So we're saying, hey, if showing carousel, then go ahead and show our hints carousel view, which is going to look like the placeholder kind of just comes to life. And then when that's happening, then we want to basically empty out the placeholder string and show nothing, so that way the hints carousel view can show. Basically, our placeholder here, we want it to act just like the placeholder inside the text field. So when there's text in there, then we're all good to go. Actually, this is what is handling that, so never mind what I just said. Then we're binding it to our text just like you normally would use a text field, and we get this isEditing property back to us, and we're using that to determine whether we should show our carousel view. And so basically we want to make sure that we are currently editing, so the field is focused, and we also want to make sure that the text is empty too. So that's it. It's really simple. And then anytime that changes, we want to update our property up at the top. And I'm just doing that with an animation, so that way it affects these two and these get animated here. Next, I didn't want any capitalization here. You can leave that up to the main call site, like you can call it on this whole hints text field if you want. I just did it in here. I didn't want to go too far into that. You can modify that even further if you want to. Something you might want to look into if you decide to go this route that I'm not really sure if you'd have to use this or not. Like I said, I haven't looked into it, but there's something like environment values and environment keys that you can use to set up and build your own modifiers essentially. Then we have this on change of property that's going to basically be watching the text, and it's going to give us the value back every time that changes, and we can update this show carousel view. So right now this is live, so I can click on it here and you'll see our hints carousel view come up, and if I start typing, this goes away, and if we delete the last character, it should return, which it does. But if I took this out, you would see that we don't get that functionality. So if I click in here, that works fine because it's just being set up initially here because of the isEditing. The isEditing is true right now. If I hit enter, well, not right there. If I come over here and hit enter, then isEditing gets turned to false. True, false. And so the thing is though, is when I start typing in keys, you'll see it doesn't know to hide that. And we get this overlapping thing, which is no good. That's not what we're after. And if you delete everything like this, you'll see it stays there again, which is what it's supposed to do, but it never left in the first place. And if we hit enter, it works because of this again, and when this is getting changed. So we need this here to tell us that, hey, there's text in here. The text isn't empty anymore. So when I put that back, everything should work as expected, which it does, which is awesome. And bam, our text field's really coming together now. So let's finish this thing up. Now, before we finish this up, I want to add a quick little way for the user to be able to clear the text that's in there. I don't know about you, but I get kind of frustrated when there's no quick little clear button. And so we're going to add that right now. And I'm going to add some more helper methods and properties down here. So let's bring this in. I'll come over here. So we have a little clear text function, and all this does is set the text back to an empty string. And we have this button transition here, which I actually should have cleaned this up earlier, but we actually don't need anything else but this portion. So I'm going to actually delete this, paste that. This is all we need. So I'm just telling it to move in from the edge, from the trailing edge. Actually, we don't need this either. So let's clean all this up because we don't need to really take that in. I think initially I wanted some more customization there, but it's just kind of unnecessary, a little bit of an overkill. So then here for the edge, we can just set this to trailing here. So here what we have, we're telling it to move in and out from the trailing edge. And then we're combining that with opacity. Again, I just think that looks cleaner. And we also combine it with a little scale effect where it scales in from 60% and out to 60%. And I'm setting the anchor point to trailing, which just means it's going to start the scaling from the right edge of our clear button. And then our spring animation here, using the bouncy again. And I'm setting a delay here because when you go to actually tap the clear button, I want there to be a slight delay before you watch the clear button go away. I feel like when I did it initially, it was just weird that the clear button was just leaving so quick under your finger, and it just kind of felt a little weird. So this delay is kind of nice. It's just enough where you get a good feel from it. Next thing, we're going to add one more property down here. This one we're going to say do private var, and we're going to call show clear button, and this is going to be of type bool. And all we're going to do here is we're going to say return, make sure the text is not empty, and that we're editing. So is editing. Just like that. That's it. That's all we want in there. The way we know to show the clear button is if the text is not empty. We want to make sure, right? Because if the text is empty, there's nothing to clear. And we want to make sure we are currently editing. So that's really it. Then what we're going to do is we have the H stack here. This is the end of that. So right after this, we'll add a spacer. And then right below that, let me bring this up a little bit. Right below that, we are going to add a button here, and I'm going to paste this code in, and we'll cover what's going on here. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to wrap this in the if show clear button, and then paste that in. So here we have, this, we need to correct this because we don't have it taking in anything anymore. It's just a variable now. And so here we're passing in our clear text function, which is right here. And we got a little X mark circle. If I put a bang here, we can see our clear button show up here. So that's all the button is there. And we're just setting the height and width to 22. And I'm not even sure if this is needed. So we can double check that by commenting that out. And I think we're ready to go. So I'm going to get rid of that again, and we'll see if we can get this working. So I'm going to go in here, add some text. Okay, we see our clear button showing up, which is awesome. And if we delete the text, we should see it go away. Sweet. And then if I click on it, this should clear the text. Now, I don't know if you noticed anything. It looks like this isn't needed, so I'm going to get rid of this. But I don't know if you noticed anything, but when we started typing some characters in, the clear button didn't animate on. So see that? It's just showing abruptly, and same with when I get rid of this. And that's not what we're looking for, but it does, however, animate away when I click the clear button. Did you see that? So something is not right here. And actually for here, sorry, not there, down in here, if you want to, we'll add a little padding here. So let's call padding. That way it kind of moves it away from the edge a little bit. And so the reason for this is because it doesn't know to animate according to the change of the text. So all we got to do for that is come up here to the text field where we're binding the text here. And right after this, we'll do animation and go down to this one where you can pass in an animation. And we're going to just pass in our spring animation here. And now it knows to animate based off the text changes. So when I do this, you'll see the button now animates on and now it animates off, which is pretty sweet. So I think that looks pretty dang good. And it also continues to animate off when we click it too. And you'll see there's that little delay there. Pretty dang cool. And honestly, our text field's finished. So let's go use this in the main view, the content view, and we'll see if we can get it nice and styled up. I'll see you over there. All right, we're on the very home stretch, so let's put this thing to use. Now I'm gonna go to the content view and we're gonna put this thing together. So let's go here. Now before I go into the body, I'm just gonna add a background property here. Not really sure if we need this one here, but I'm just gonna leave that there for now, and we can test that out to see if that's a little unnecessary because I have two of these ignore safe areas, but let's keep it going. So we're going to bring in a couple properties here at the top. So we have two state properties. I don't even think this needs to be a state property. Yeah, I think just like that's fine. So and then we'll bring in the majority of the code here. So I'm going to get rid of this VStack and the padding and paste this in here. So essentially we just have a navigation view. We need an S here again. There we go. We see our view updating over here. So it's looking pretty nice. And everything's living inside this navigation view. Then we have a VStack with a spacer. So that way, that's the reason why the search bar is pushed all the way to the top. And then we're using our hints text field. This is how it looks. Passing in our icon. We got our binding to our text 1 here. Then we have our inactive placeholder and active placeholder, which if we go to this, let's see here. for shopping, we can see these two are the same. But notice in the location search, they're slightly different. And this means, so the inactive one is the one that's showing when the cursor is not showing. And the reason why, see, this is why we have the two different ones, is because this is what's going to show when the carousel is active. So we want to replace our own addresses here, and this is what's going to be rotating. And then when you stop it, we put kind of like a static one there for you to see. In the shopping one, we just make them the same. So it just says search without it, or without the carousel being active. And then when you tap into the text field, it still continues to say search, but we show the bunch of those different search hints there for you. So that's how that works. I think I said I was going to explain that, so I just wanted to make sure I covered that for a second. So if we run it here, let me make sure I choose a simulator. Go ahead and run it. Give it a second. There we go. And we click inside. We see this little animation. So when we click off of it, well, not click off it, you press enter to unfocus the text field, and then we can wait and see this animate. That's looking pretty slick. When we type on it, we get our clear button to show up. Delete the last character, that goes away. And we press enter. This animates back down and our clear button animates away. We tap into it, the clear button should show up. We can click that, get rid of stuff. And bam, this is pretty sweet. I think we did an awesome job. Yeah, I dig it. Thanks so much for joining me today. I had a lot of fun building this. Before you go, I have a challenge for you. See if you can add a cancel button to this text field that only shows when the field is focused, and it'll end up towards the right. And then when the cancel button is tapped, it'll actually clear out the text and dismiss the keyboard. Let me know how you got on with this challenge down in the comments below. I can't wait to read about them. And also feel free to post a link to a video or the code showing off what you did. And lastly, the link to this code that you saw in this video will be in the description below. Again, I had a ton of fun, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.